Yes, Ursula?
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
I'm older than most of you in the
Yeah,
audience, so getting up this high is hard.
Yeah. So it's great to see you again. Thanks for
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. So shortly after Ursula became CEO, I spent a very long day with her. I wrote a 3,000-word profile of Ursula's cover the Sunday business section, and it was quite a day. I got to say, we started early down in Florida. It was a meeting of thousands of your salespeople, and it was an incredible lesson and reminder of just how important stamina is for what all of you do. You just kept going and going, and I would grab you between meetings, and then we were on the plane going back at the end of the very long day, and I said, "Do you need some time?" And you said, "No, I'm good." So we kept the recorders going. Yep. So again, thank you for joining us. I want to spend most of the time talking about some of the lessons that you've learned during your 6 years as a CEO. But your company is in the news these days, so I'd like to start with that. So Xerox has announced that you're going to be breaking into two companies. What does the future hold for you?
Yeah, one of the things that was really interesting when we decided, it's kind of like a full circle discussion. When I became CEO, I was inundated by press on this subject of how does it feel? You're the first, the only, whatever. And we pushed that back a lot. If you recall, Ann and I did one interview together on this subject, and we decided that we wouldn't talk about it again together because it was not the news. The news was more about the company. And when we decided to split the company, I had to think about how people would think about me and how the board would think about me. And what I decided to do was to not discuss this subject at all. To say to the board that we should step back and take a look at what the company is doing and where we should be going. And one of the things I'm going to move off the table is my future. Mm-hmm. And by the way, the future of my direct team as well. So let's go into this journey without faces attached to any of the output. And so we went through that, made a decision, and the first thing that came out of people's mouths when we decided to announce the decision was, "What are you going to be doing?" Which is basically just, right. It's all about me. It's all about me.
It's a pretty natural question, though.
It is. By the way, and I don't even discourage the question, but I did say at that time that it's really important that we keep our eye on the ball, and the eye on the ball is this company, this 140,000. $20 billion enterprise that we have to kind of make sure that we're doing the right things for. Mm-hmm. And so we put that aside. We've been thinking about it a lot. I have been in the board, and we're moving our way through it, and we'll pretty soon discuss it. Okay. You will not hear it today. Okay. So it's important that we move on past that subject, and if we ever get to public questions, you can ask it any different way that you want. But I will say we're thinking about it, and I'm very, very confident about the two companies. I'm very confident that both of them will have leadership that allows them to continue to be excellent providers, and that my role will be appropriate in one of those two places.
So if I keep asking the same question 5 different ways, I'm not going to get an answer?
I think you've been with me for a whole day, and after about the third time, I'll say something that's not too kosher for public consumption.
So when I spent that day with you, you had just made the big acquisition to move into services. You had set this new vision and strategy for Xerox. 6 years later, a lot of headwinds. Talk about that. What was different? What surprised you? What didn't you anticipate with the strategy?
Yeah, I'll talk about the positive things that we expected and that came true, and some that we didn't expect that are just amazing. Xerox has it's iconic. You say this word, but it is true. I mean, Xerox means copying, and no matter how hard we try to distance ourselves from that, we realize that was not a good thing, right? All of the positive about creating a new industry, about continuing to transform that industry to morph the core assets that you have of being global, of having an unbelievable innovation kind of engine in our company, this idea that complexity is good because we actually are there to solve it. All of these things are things that we wanted to apply to the business process space. Yeah. And the great news is that we were able to do that, particularly the innovation side. It's pretty cool. I was just outside with the head of my research lab here in Palo Alto, head of Park, and we were talking about urban mobility and all the urban mobility solutions that we're using our basic imaging engine, innovation around imaging to actually change and think about urban mobility and making it easier for people. So the good news that we found in this combination was that business process work can be changed fundamentally by applying innovation. Because business process work in the past was all about people. You know, taking your mess and we do it, and we can, you know, maybe take your mess with some other guy's mess and it costs you a little bit less. And we do it with a lot of people all over the world. And what you can do, and what the goal was, and is coming to life, is taking those people and actually allowing them to be significantly more efficient, add significantly more value, less time, less waste, less error by applying technology. Those things we found were really, really cool. And the idea for customers to actually put this whole value chain together. The thing that was very challenging was taking solutions around the world. And we know how to do this. I mean, everybody, right? We make copiers and printers, you plug them in, you have to change the power cord, but they work everywhere. Right. Turns out not the same with business process. Actually, culture is very, very important. Obviously, regulation law is very important. And one of the things we found that changed in the last couple of years, every nation wants to employ more and more people. I'm almost in the face of technology, you know, against technology. So if you go to India, whenever I go to India, it's interesting, I look at the roads, we're a big transportation solution provider. And you get in the car and you say, we can fix this. I mean, we can make this seamless and significantly more efficient. And it flies right in the face of removing a whole bunch of labor from the workforce that the Indian government has to think about. Right? So all of these things start to actually come full circle to hit us as a headwind. At the same time, technology helped us as a tailwind. And the important thing about splitting the company is that we're not destroying the two sides of the company at all. Actually, the two sides are going to look very different than when we started. We had an IT business that we've outsourced. We had a smaller transportation business, a much smaller healthcare business in our BPO side, and they're significantly bigger now. Our tech business has moved very significantly to high-end color inkjet printing and solutions around that kind of space. So the two companies will be separate, and I hope to work together a little bit more, as we continue. But a lot has changed around the world that forced us to actually think about having them together. And is it worthwhile to have them together? Is it more worthwhile to have them together than apart? Because we could run this company with them together. There's no doubt about that. We're doing it, right? And the whole question was not whether or not that was a good or bad thing. It's whether or not we should continue it, and what's the best solution set for shareholders, employees, customers, et cetera.
Gotcha. And can you give us some insight into what it was like to deal with Carl Icahn?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I haven't dealt with him a whole lot. So I've met him a couple of times. He's, much to the surprise of me, even a pretty nice gentleman. I mean, he's always been fairly gracious. He talks a little bit louder than most, but he's a gracious guy, has not been engaged. We has not been actively engaged in the process at all. We had come to our conclusion well before we spoke before I spoke to Carl. Mr. Icahn, as I call him, he says call him Carl, but I call him Mr. Icahn. He's old enough to warrant Mr. Icahn. But he's been nothing but constructive. Nothing but constructive, and not very engaged at all.
Good. So let's shift to leadership lessons learned. You've been CEO for more than 6 years now. If you were to write a letter to yourself today, to yourself 6 years earlier when you first started the job, what have you learned? What has surprised you?
Change is hard. Starting is easy, ending is not. So change is hard. We already knew that, and you know that in your life, right? If all you want to do is move your house, right? You have your husband, and I have a husband and kids, and just moving from one house to another is like we're going to end the world. And try that with 100,000 people, and trying to get anything aligned around that. So any change is really difficult. We say it, we make it trite by saying it that way, but literally change is a job in and of itself. Managing that is a job in and of itself, and people make it the challenge, right? deciding the strategy is not going to be hard. Making sure that you have the financial wherewithal, that's not hard. It's literally getting all of these people aligned towards a direction that you want them to go, and it's one thing. Starting things are really easy, ending things are really hard. People are really enamored with starting stuff. It's really exciting. And we found out this new thing we're going to start stuff. One of the things that we have in our company, I have it all the time with my leadership team, is that we got to stop doing certain things. And you give permission to stop, and it still doesn't, people still don't want to stop. Ending is hard. And the other thing is that history matters. It's looking forward is exciting, but you can't do a revolution in a day. Not a revolution, a peaceful revolution, one that you want to be peaceful. So you have to continue to look back a little bit and make sure that you drag with you through this revolution the things that you want to last. And you can't, as I said, starting is easy. This idea of starting right is really important, because however you start, when it comes time to stop or change, you're going to have to take that crap with you and kind of try to transform it. So if you can be flexible, agile, diverse, integrated, kind, global in the beginning as you start your efforts, then you don't have to fight to become those things in the future. It's really an important set of things. Right. And then the other thing is that, I say this all the time, and it's probably a little bit crazy for this audience, but money is really not the biggest thing in the world. That's one of the things that, even 6 years down the road, you realize that it's not for personal motivation. It is part of the goal, it's the thing that you check, but if that's all you check, then it's just not enough. It's just not enough. And so we've learned in our company that you have to absolutely engage people with hope, with reality and with hope and with passion around good things and all of the stuff that you knew growing up as a kid, but you thought that when you walked into a business you could become like this, I'm a leader, and it's not about that. It's all about a lot of this soft stuff as well really matters.
Yeah. And when we spoke 6 years ago and I asked you what some of your goals were for shifting the culture, you had this phrase, I don't know if you remember, but you said that
I remember.
one of the things you wanted to address was Xerox's terminal niceness.
Yeah. Yeah.
People at Xerox are really nice.
Yeah.
And you described the phenomenon that I think we can all relate to, where people are in a meeting, they nod their heads, yes, I'm in agreement, and then after the meeting, somebody says that was crazy. And for you, it's like, well, why didn't you say that in the meeting? Right. So how did that go?
By the way, it's going well.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why I say it's going well, one of the things if you're a leader that is unavoidable is that your personality kind of seeps out even when you try to keep it in. And this idea about terminal niceness is one of the big challenges of a big company, particularly one that has a long history, right? So you grew up with people and you want to be kind, and that's a good thing. But kind doesn't always mean that you're smiling and happy. Kind means that you're real with each other and that you can have a set of constructive, I call them fast-paced discussions, and you've got to build up relationships to allow that to happen without having a whole lot of scar tissue at the end. And that's one of the big changes that the company has gone through. And one of the things that really helped us when we went through this second decision, when we went through the decision to divest of our ITO business, it was a big point for us. And internally, it was a huge deal. These are our children, right? Very good business, subscale, but very good business, great customers, great relationships, an employee, and a lot of value. Mm-hmm. And the idea that we were going to actually send them off to another company, a French company, was almost, the conversations in the beginning were all in the meetings, oh yeah, it's financially really cool. You'd walk out and I had more people trying to kill this thing than you could imagine, right? Without discussing it out loud, because it was a little bit counterculture. We wanted to keep it because they were our guys, not because we could do it really well. And this niceness is one of the things that you have to work against. You can't be raised by wolves. You can't be rude, right? Totally rude all the time. You can be rude a little bit some of the time, but you can't be rude all the time. So it's important that you kind of mix this thing together. Leading is I watched, I don't know how many people have seen Hamilton, the play. Yeah. It's great, just a great example of creativity. And there's a line when the king comes out and they won, the revolutionaries won, and he sings this song and he says, so now what? What's next? You're sitting there, now you're running, and you'll find that they're going to start hating you because you're going to make decisions that they don't like. And are you ready for that? And that's part of the whole cycle of leading, is that you have to deal with all of the scar tissue, all of the crap that comes with good decisions and bad decisions, because you make some good and you make some bad. And some decisions that seem like they are bad that turn out to be good, but everybody hates. And those are the things that are difficult.
That's great. You said that another one of your goals when you took over as CEO, we had a long discussion about the importance of fearlessness to you and how much you love that quality in people. And as you described it, it's a bias toward action. It's not recklessness. It's just let's do stuff. Yeah. Maybe we have to break some eggs, but again, that bias toward action. So how did you get that message across to people? Do you feel like it's stuck?
Yeah, I think it's stuck. It's action. It is exam. This isn't you can speak it a lot, but most people, I think, don't want to not be active or action-oriented. They just don't know how. And they don't know the level of support that they have around them for assuring that you don't have catastrophes, right? Because particularly big organizations have enough structure that a catastrophe is unlikely to happen. But being good at what you do, having confidence in the fact that you're pretty good at what you do, and that you got there not because somebody liked the way you looked or because you had a great speech. You got there from a lot of kind of energies and passions inside yourself, but proven examples. I think if you can have people see how successful they are, how good they are, how their natural instincts are good, solid, and give them like small examples of how to do this, you find out that people's natural propensity is to move, right? And you just got to build up a reservoir strength for them. It is one of the most amazing lack of things that I think we have right now. Because, taking something that exists for a long time, Xerox, IBM, HP, and we can, Microsoft, all these things, Microsoft a little bit less for a long time, but now seems like forever. And changing and taking something that's not broken, and it's not a disaster, it's not broken, but knowing that there's still so much more that you can do, and being fearless in moving that forward is one of the fundamental requirements that you have as a leader. Right? And so that's what my thing is more about this. It's not about just the status quo. We need that. I was speaking backstage with a colleague of mine, and we were talking about the fact that everybody has like this unbelievable disdain for all these old companies. The companies that give you your refrigerator, that makes the toilet that you flush, that the shower head, these are all old, the wood, the stage. So we have to have enough respect for that. And those companies have to have enough respect to understand that they have some things that they have to do for the current population, a lot. The vast majority of their earnings, a large amount of their revenue for the whole population, but they also have a responsibility to the shareholders, to their employees, to their customers to continue to morph. And the way that you do that is by taking risks. And it's not, as I say, reckless risk. It's about measured risk. And one of the hardest things to teach, we hire from the best schools in the world, is people understanding that you have to change, and you have to do it sometimes in a system. You can't, like I said, this is not a country of revolutionaries only. We're a country of really aggressive evolutionaries, right? And that's what makes it great, right? So we have to fit everybody in, and I'm preaching. But I think it's one of the most amazing assets that we have as individuals, and we dampen it down so much. And primarily because we don't know how to kind of pull it together and make it like a beautiful minestrone soup, right? So we don't know how to do that. But there is, and if you listen to politics today, it's on Super Tuesday. I'm so happy I'm here and not paying attention to the Wall Street Journal, to the New York Times polls. Yeah. I only read the New York Times, by the way. It's actually true. But because the thing that makes companies great is literally this integration of a whole bunch of crazy people around a common goal and getting the best out of that. It's really important.
And when you took over as CEO, you added to your degree of difficulty by taking on this multi-billion-dollar acquisition. Any lessons, sort of do's and don'ts about merging cultures?
Yeah, by the way, so many. It's amazing. Culture is it's like, it's hard. It's history, it's long, and so you can't, it's not something that happens fast or easy. And we learned that at Xerox. We learned it at Xerox, some good ways, some hard ways, right? One of the things that's really important when you buy a company is that you want to not destroy there's this whole thing about, you got to keep the management team, you can't destroy. Sometimes it's important to destroy real quick, right? Because what you want is to create one, right? And there's a huge amount of concern about wiping out whatever the old dominant was. Sometimes it's really important that you pay close attention, right? You listen to the language that people use, particularly the people far away from you, that you have some people who are real good critics and come back and tell you, because sometimes you have to destroy to build. So there's all these contradictions. We're not revolutionaries, but you got to be a little bit of a revolutionary. And one of the things I learned at Xerox when we acquired ACS is that there were certain things that we should have stamped out immediately, and basically had a test, right? When you walked in the door, you take a little swipe of your forehead, and if you had this gene, we actually said you had to leave, right? because there were certain things that if you allow it to go for a long time, they become cancers, and it's hard and when you find it in the beginning, you could actually stamp it out and probably live a long life, but when it spreads, it's hard. Yeah. And those are the kinds of things that you learn. By the way, on the old side and the new side. The other thing I always learned throughout my career over and over and over again is how important it is to act quickly on people. You know early when it's not right, and then you say for some reason that it'll get better. And it very rarely does. Yeah. It very rarely does. The instinct, by the way, they can work somewhere else. It's not about them being useless people. Right. It's about not fitting in the culture and just being too much. Fitting in the culture sounds horrible, but it's just being too much energy to keep them in. Those are the kind of things that you learn, over time. By the way, you learned them again and again and again, right? So you learned them when you were 6 years old, and you learned them when you're 16, and then when you're 26, and it keeps going, and you keep saying, "Oh my God, I did it again! I did this again! I made this mistake again." So, it's one of those things.
That's great. I'm going to reserve the right to ask the last question before we finish, but we do have about 5 minutes for questions from the audience. Anybody? If you could hold your question until we get you a microphone in front here, please, so that everybody can hear. And again, please say who you are and who you work for.
I'm Sylvie Buagia from Switzerland. I sit on several boards in Switzerland, in France, and in England. And I'd like to know, you said that the money was not the biggest thing in the world or in the company. So I'd like to know what it is for you, what else is for you besides money? And the other question, because I'm sorry to ask that, from a woman to another woman, but because you are a woman and you are the CEO of Xerox, I'd like to know how you manage your life with your family, your husband, and your work.
Yeah. By the way, it's this last question is the most legitimate question, right? But we've I was talking about this earlier as well. We kind of beat it out of ourselves, particularly women, right? It's like, really, do we have to talk about that again? But it is. The answer to the first question is the second question. The thing that's probably the most important to me, that I find out over and over and over and over again, is that I actually have a really great family. And it means so much more to have them settled and happy and contributing and well-rounded. My 2 kids, my husband. As I said to somebody earlier, I've been married to him so long, I don't even refer to him as a person anymore. He's like that guy who lives in my house with me. And our energies are focused on these multipliers that we have called these 2 kids and our nieces, and it's a big deal. And as many of those people, these young people that we can get close to us, not because we have all of the answers, quite to the contrary, but because we allow them to actually think about having answers for us in the future. It's a big deal for me. This idea that we have a world of 7 billion people tending towards 9, and the vast majority of them have very few options about how they want to live in the world. So my passions are around that as well as, and money helps there, right? Money helps, but it's so much more than that. How I do it from a work and family perspective, first of all, I have a great husband. It counts, it matters. I have a good support system there. And I very rarely take myself very seriously. And it sounds funny, but it is really true. I am one of these people who continually believes that somebody can help me with something, that I don't have the answer here. And so if I can figure out a way to get somebody to help me, however it is, and I've built this community of, and by the way, I do the same back, so it's not only one way, of helpers, and, raising my family and organizing my life and being engaged in things that I'm interested in. And it's so much less about me than it is anything else. And if you can keep thinking about this, that there's probably a better way, there's people who can help you. And then third is this thing called joy. Not the movie, which I haven't seen, but this, you have to feel good. You have to feel as though you're doing something worthwhile and useful. And very rarely do people say the result of the good and the worthy was money. Very rarely. Right? But almost hardly ever, right? And so this idea of you got to resonate, do things that when you do them, joy kind of resonates from them. And you have to stop doing things that doesn't, when joy doesn't resonate, particularly for a long time. And any given day, joy doesn't resonate on something that I'm doing, right? But if it happens that way on a continuous basis, you got to stop doing it. And sometimes that means you got to move away from money, comfort, etc., and move towards things that make you happy. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Who else? Question right there. If you could wait for the microphone, Lorna.
Thanks. Hi, Ursula. I'm Lorna Bornstein from Gawker. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you. You look the same, by the way. That's good.
You too. Better, I would say.
Yeah, thank you.
What do you need to stop doing when you take on whatever this new role is?
Yeah, one of the things that I do poorly is stop doing things, right? So I say that, and to say no to things. It's really, really hard. So one of the things that I want to not stop doing, but start doing more, is saying no a little bit more. I'm very, I live, is my filler word, obviously, but I lived in this area when you're kind of pinging a little bit. I'm really comfortable pinging. I really like it. So, I'm on a not-for-profit board, 2 or 3 of them, and then another one asks, and you go, yeah, I can do that. And I can look at my calendar and say, yeah, I have this 45 minutes that's not tied up. And if you add them up and every day, that's a whole bunch of days, right? So I have time for that. And it turns out there is a point where it becomes a little bit too much. And this whole room, I'm sure, has that same problem. And so I'm trying to actually reserve a little bit more time for me to just relax a little bit and go deeper in things versus touch a lot of things, just go real deep in things. It'd be good if I could do that.
So the last thing I want Ursula to share with you all is something that she told me about 6 years ago. So let me paint the scene. You've given somebody a new job. 6 months in, they come to you and say, Ursula, I'm ready for my promotion. What do you tell them?
Yeah, I love this. This happens even to this day, yesterday. Tomorrow it'll happen as well. So ambition has become, and ambition by positional ambition has become this, it's just amazing to me. Yeah. It's not about like I did this job really well or everybody wants to be the next thing. So people come to me and they have what they call executive interviews, which I always thought was interesting. So I have an executive interview with them and I say, so, they say, well, how's it going? I say, how's it going? They go, it's good. I say, well, how you doing? Good, I'm ready to move. So, how long have you been here? They say 6 months. I've been doing my job 6 months. And I know it by heart. I said, so here's the way you, it's time for me to go now, and to go to do the next thing. And I said, well, interestingly enough, here's how I think about jobs all the time. So this is ground zero. We gave you a job when you were well below ground zero. And for the first 6 months, right, so the area under the curve from, you're like this, all of this area here, you've wasted our time and our money, right? Learning stuff, right? You learned where the bathrooms were, you learned how to not screw up a whole bunch of stuff. And right when you got to the point where you're at ground zero, you want to walk away. But you owe us all this space under the curve, right? So I say to people all the time, just when you think that you've learned everything is a time when you cannot leave. Because you got to pay back all that stuff underneath by transforming the work that you're doing, right? So you're going to operate at this ground zero and you're going to say, I'm bored as hell, you know? And that's when I know that you're failing, right? Because you've literally taken all that you can, and you're going to now go to another job where you're going to take all that you can, to another job where you're going to take all that you can. By the time you become CEO, it's going to be impossible for you to pay it back, right? So you have to actually work for a little while to transform the work and get some area above the curve, right? And you got to leave it better than you walked into it. By the way, that's the same thing in life, right? My mother would tell me all the time that you got to leave behind more than you take away. That's the whole goal here in the world, right? So in the beginning, you take all of this crap, right? You use energy, you can't walk, you can't do anything, right? And then you get to the point where you think you're the best in the world, and you start to go off and you keep taking. And work is the same way. You have to literally engage. It's a two-way contract. We pay you, you pay us. We pay you, you pay us. Net, you're going to get a little bit better, we're going to get a little bit better. If it's only about you getting better, it's not good. It's not a good, I say go somewhere else. There's another company that can take you because it's not a really good thing.
That's great. This has been so awesome. Thank you so much.